Now, the American Gunsmithing Institute presents another instructional video on firearms design, operation, maintenance, and repair. This video is to be used for informational purposes only. Do not attempt the procedures shown unless you have a thorough understanding of the firearm's design and operation and the skills needed to properly perform the procedure. If a firearm is modified or assembled incorrectly, it can be unsafe and/or illegal. If you do not understand all the information presented in this video, take the firearm to a qualified gunsmith. A preview of the latest courses from the American Gunsmithing Institute immediately follows the conclusion of this program.
Hi, I'm Bob Dunlap and welcome to the Armorer's course on the CZ75. CZ75 is one of my favorite pistols, the Colt 45 automatic being one and the Browning High Power being one, and the SIG P210 and P220 series are awful fine pistols, and I just think the world of this CZ75. I have a couple actually. I have an assortment of them here. I have two EAA Witnesses in 45 ACP. Then I have a Tanfoglio made in Italy, and the Witnesses are also Italian. The Tanfoglio is made in Italy, and it's in 40 Smith & Wesson. I have here one of my own personal guns. Actually, that's mine also. And this is an original, early, I got it at about 1978, before they were actually importable, CZ75 from the factory. And it has a 30 Luger conversion unit in it. I have the original 9mm barrel and spring in it here. Then we have a factory, thanks to CZ USA, a factory cutaway. Then we have a EAA Witness in 9mm and a plastic EAA Witness in 45 ACP. So we have a pretty good assortment. I know for a fact that the Tanfoglio is made under license from CZ, and I believe that the Witnesses are also, but I'm not positive of that. And like an idiot, I forgot to ask them when I talked to the factory if the EAAs were, but they're pretty close copy. The Tanfoglio is virtually identical. And there are some changes in my early one and this later CZ cutaway. The gun was designed in Czechoslovakia by František Kuski, and the first production, well, actually the first models came out in 1975, so it's the CZ75, but the actual first production guns came out in 1976. It was an instant hit. It's a very modern double action. It feels good and it works, and has a nice, light, smooth double action out of the box. It's an excellent gun and caught on real quick in Europe. Of course, it wasn't importable in this country until the breakup of Czechoslovakia and the demise of the communist regime. And it's pretty popular. CZ is doing very well in this country. I think that probably their products, particularly their rifles, are real bargains today. They're an excellent gun, and they don't cost a whole lot of money. They're a bit more than a Remington or Winchester, pretty much model for model, but you get a lot more too. So it's a good buy, and they shoot well. The factory CZ, of course, if you're familiar with Brno, during the communist regime, why all of the firearms made by both companies and a lot of other accessories and products also were sold under the Brno name, B-R-N-O. But after the breakup, why Brno went on their way and CZ went their way, both in different cities, so logical. But during the communist regime, why all of that stuff is sold by one company or named after one company, even though it might have been made by 5 or 6, it was sold under the Brno name. So you're going to find Brno guns, B-R-N-O, Brno guns, and you're going to find CZ guns. They were basically the same guns that you saw in the 60s and 70s, but now they're made and named by each individual company. I like the gun, as I said before. I'm very pleased with it. I think it's a very modern design and very well done. Kuski was a sharp cookie because they did a good job on this gun. Well, here we are with the factory cutaway. We'll start showing you how the gun actually cycles. The gun is a short recoil lock breech tipping barrel gun, and it's cam locked. I'll show you over here how it operates. The slide stop right here goes through the barrel in its cam lug right there. Now this is lock position, slides against the barrel. When you shoot the gun, the rearward forces or the forces build up and push the barrel out the muzzle. Oops, let's try it. And push the bullet out the muzzle. At the same time, an equal amount of energy goes into the slide and pulls the barrel back with it. Since it's locked in place, it moves back, hits the cam, drops down, and separates these lugs. It separates these lugs from matching recesses in the slide. We'll show you on the cutaway now. You see right now, they're locked in place, and if we push on the barrel, it doesn't move. It's locked. When the forces build up, it pushes the barrel and slide back. I should say pushes the slide back, and the barrel's pulled back by the slide via these lugs. The cam hits and starts to cam the barrel down. You can see it starting to unlock now. The barrel stops, fully down, fully unlocked, and the slide continues on, cycles the gun, extracts, ejects, comes forward, and feeds the round. So, bang, comes back, unlocks, barrel stops, slide continues on its way, ejects, strips the round from the magazine, goes closed. Now at this point, the extractor courses over the rim of the case. When it cycles again, or you open the slide, it'll pull the case out, and the ejector will hit it and eject the case. This type of locking system is relatively common, and many semi-automatic pistols use it. The more modern way that's coming into vogue now is to have one large square lug. SIGs, Glocks, and a lot of other guns, copies of those, use this single lug square type locking system. It's a good system because it gives you lots of mass of metal. It's on a rotary, on a radii one like this, you don't have so much metal out at the sides. You can see there's not a whole lot there. So that it's really ineffective. So this is really all you've got is the middle 2/3 of that probably. When it's flat and square, you've got the whole thing full depth. So if you've got 40 thousandths of engagement, you've got 40 thousandths of engagement all the way across. Where here you've got 40 thousandths at the top, but less on the sides. So they put in 3 lugs to make it hold up to the battering or shooting. Now on this gun, the barrel doesn't hit anything to stop it like it does on a lot of guns. They hit the frame or something to stop. On this gun, the slide stop does the stopping. We'll put the barrel in, put the slide stop in. And you see there's nothing there to stop it except the slide stop. Or on a Colt and a lot of other guns, not all guns, but a lot of other guns, why, they'll hit the frame on the lug and stop the barrel from moving rearward any farther. This is all done by the slide stop pin. It's fairly robust, and it's well made, and they don't break, at least on the CZs they don't break. If it was real skinny or soft, it would bend from this repeated pounding, but it doesn't. They hold up well. If you don't have enough engagement, so let's say if the didn't engage as deep but engaged like that, just barely, then this constant pushing on it as you shoot it will finally wear away the metal. You pick up what we call loose breech, and finally it'll open when it's still under pressure, real bad. The gun won't blow up, but it'll jam up and stop working. This barrel has a little bit of loose breech. You can see it moving back and forth a few thousandths of an inch. The 30 caliber barrel I made up a good many years ago, and it has a little less, but it still has some loose breech too, which means I screwed up. You don't want any, but you can tolerate a few thousandths, a couple of thousandths. Once in a while, you get a gun that doesn't have enough lockup and starts to wear the lugs, On this type of gun, to get more engagement, you could lower this contour here a little bit and come down and make a little pocket. Like that. That'll push the barrel up, because now it'll slide across here, find that pocket, and raise it up, because the pocket will have, it'll come down like this. You'll have opened this up, say 25 thousandths. It ends there. When the slide stop pin hits that new spot, it can go further rearward, the barrel can go farther forward. There's a hump there, so it'll rise up on the hump, and that'll raise that engagement 25 thousandths of an inch. You do that as a last resort. Frankly, it might be easier for most of you to just simply replace the barrel. But we can do that. Also, if it doesn't quite unlock, if you put a new barrel or slide on a gun and it doesn't quite unlock, you could actually file this cam forward and up a little bit. Now it would allow the barrel to come down farther and free the lugs of the barrel from the recesses in the slide. This gun, or this gun's barrel, or this design of this gun, has a single or one-piece ramp. When it's in the gun like this in the frame, see, there's no other ramp there. Like a 45 automatic Colt, there's two pieces. There's a ramp in the frame and a ramp in the barrel. On this gun, there's only the ramp on the barrel. You notice too that the ramp on the barrel actually extends slightly lower than the end of the magazine, so there's no way in this gun that the bullet nose can get below the ramp and stub. It'll hit the actual ramp and slide up and go into the chamber. Feeding is not a major problem with the CZ75. They've always fed well unless there's something drastically wrong with them. Anyway, that's how the barrel locks and unlocks, and that's how you'd alter it if you wanted to. The single action is relatively conventional. It's cocked, and I'll show you on this one where the sear is and how it operates basically. This is the sear right here. When you cock the gun, this little spring that you see right here pushes the sear into engagement. When you pull the trigger, the drawbar or trigger bar hits it down below and pivots it out of the way, and the hammer will fall. I can do it by hand by pressing here. But watch when I pull the trigger. See it move? Now it moves because the drawbar is hitting, I think you can see that little piece right there. Now watch it move slightly. See it moving? That's the sear. Now when you pull it double action, see it hit the sear and move it? If it fell on double action before it hit the sear, the hammer would fall either in the full cock notch or the safe notch, depending on how far back it was. That's the safe notch. It fell into it. But if the trigger's pulled and far enough to deactivate the sear, then the hammer falls all the way. Now the double action is a little harder to understand than the single action. So that's, the sear catches the hammer and holds it, the drawbar hits the sear and moves it out of the way, and the hammer falls. The double action, much more complicated, but very modern. Actually, I really quite like it. I'm going to take this one apart and show you. On the hammer is this little strut. And basically it's a sear system, and you can see down here on the drawbar where the strut catches, there's a little sear there. I pull the trigger, that catches, they're in theory holes. Now what happens is that this little hump right here on the drawbar hits this surface actually it's right here on the sear housing and pushes it down. Now I have the trigger pulled partly on double action. Hammer have not fallen. But if you can picture that sear housing is setting right here, and that's got a slight angle here and a slight angle on the sear housing. When it moves back, it also pushes it down. It fires. It fires because this little strut on the hammer right here rests on the frame way down here. You can't see that, can you? Right there. And it can go no further down, so that when the trigger's pulled, that strut can come down, hammer strut can come down and hit that part of the frame, but can go no lower. And at that point, of course, it makes contact with the sear housing and pushes the drawbar down out of engagement with the strut. So that's how the double action works. You can watch it work. You can see it hit right here on the housing. Yeah, now we got it. You can watch it work. You can see it hit right here on the housing. Right there. See it camming itself down? It's going to lose its grip pretty quick and fall. Yeah, this housing is the sear housing at the bottom of the sear assembly, if you want to call it that. Now, as of yet, I've never had a problem with the double action on one of these, but I can see that it's a potential for a problem, because as it wears, it'll start to dump the hammer later and later and later, and pretty soon it will stop. Now, the easiest way to correct that is to just take a little bit off the sear, so that it won't have quite as much engagement, then it'll dump a little bit sooner. Now this fits in the gun like this. This is the gun down here. This is the actual sear surface that catches the hammer. So if it was dumping too late and wouldn't always let go, you could just break the sear off at about a 45-degree angle for just a few thousandths of an inch. That would take up for the wear that took place here and here, and on the matching places on the drawbar. Now you could also, if you're good with TIG, add a few thousandths to the end of the strut on the hammer, so that it couldn't go down quite as low. Then when the drawbar was pushed down, it would release a little bit sooner on its downward travel. It's really a surprisingly simple gun, and it really works well. The double action system has pretty good mechanical advantage, and that's why it feels so good. And it does. It feels good. It's nice, smooth, and if anything, it gets softer as it goes back rather than harder, as most guns do get. Most of them tend to get stiffer as you pull it. This one's it stays pretty uniform, and if anything, gets ever so slightly lighter. I think that's one reason why it feels good. Now when the gun cycles, we've pulled the trigger, hammer fell, we have ignition, the trigger's still pulled, the slide moves back, watch it push the drawbar down, right there. And that broke the connection between the drawbar or trigger bar and the sear. We release the trigger, drawbar comes forward and picks up on the double action hammer strut again. Picks up in front of the sear again. And we pull the trigger. Now it's going to hit the sear. Can you see? Yeah, you can see it hit the sear right there. Moves it, hammer falls. Gun cycles. Broke the connection between the sear and the trigger bar. Released, pops back up in front of the sear. Hammer falls, disconnects, picks back up in front of the sear, ready for the next shot. Double action, of course, it picks up the strut in the front of the hammer on a second sear system. Then it hits the primary sear system, the single action sear system, moves it out of the way. Then it hits the cam on the sear housing and cams the drawbar down, breaks the connection, the hammer falls. Remember that if it didn't push the sear out of the way, when the double action released, it released it too soon, basically, and it would either fall in the full cock notch or in the safe notch, depends on how far back the hammer was. Neat gun. Has a rebounding firing pin, and the firing pin is shorter than the housing that it lives in, so that if you have the hammer down and you drop it on the hammer, it won't fire. Also, the newer gun, the Cutaway, has a firing pin blocking safety inside of it, and I'll show you that. The older gun does not. My older gun does not have that. We'll pull this apart and show you. Now, if we try to push the firing pin in right now, it won't go in very far, and you can see the plunger move. Now if we push the plunger in, we push the firing pin way in. That's disengaged, that's engaged. You see the difference in the movement? What does that is this little gadget they stuck on in the sear housing. You pull the trigger, it moves up. You see it? That's what pushes that plunger up out of the way. So when you pull the trigger, that rises, pushes the plunger out of the way, and the firing pin can pass by it and can fire. If by chance the sear was blocked somehow, now that little lever hasn't moved up, has it? Let's say the sear got stuck, or it slipped off the full cock notch and the hammer fell. It would fall all the way down because the sear can't catch it in the safe notch, but the hammer would strike the firing pin blocking plunger, or safety as they call it, would stop it from going forward far enough to fire the gun. Now this firing pin's been cut off so you can't tell, so this has been a deactivated gun, but it would not be sticking out in this mode, would not. Just like it doesn't stick out if the hammer's all the way down against the firing pin, it wouldn't stick out then either, because the firing pin is shorter than the housing it lives in. Now, when I converted this gun to 30 Luger, it has a lot less energy than a 9mm. So basically, we took an old barrel that was damaged, cut it off, retubed it in 30 caliber, took a spring of sort of the right strength, and basically turned it down until the gun cycled reliably with the 30 Luger. I also made the barrel an inch longer, and I'm not quite sure why I did that, but I did it. It looks funny sticking out of the end of the slide. Anyway, it's a fun gun to shoot because it doesn't have any recoil. This is the slide, and this is the firing pin blocking safety in it. This is the new model gun. It's the factory Cutaway, and directly below that is the older slide. You notice it doesn't have that plunger. It doesn't have the firing pin blocking safety. The newer gun does. This is the newer frame, and you can see that piece rise and fall. And here's the piece out of the older frame. You see, you don't have that piece to rise and fall. It's gone. It's not there. Never was. Difference in the two guns. Now that's one safety. The other safety, of course, is the fact that the firing pin is shorter than the housing that it lives in. Now remember that on the cutaway gun, the firing pin has been shortened, but see the firing pin stick out? Now if I push the firing pin in flush with the back of the firing pin stop, you don't see any firing pin sticking out, do you? So if the hammer pushes to that point, it will not protrude and will not fire a gun, not fire a cartridge. But when the hammer hits it, a good sharp blow from a distance, then it picks up inertia energy from the hammer and continues on its own. Fires, returns, discharges the round and returns. One safety is the fact that the firing pin is shorter than the housing that it lives in, so that it must be struck while it's sticking out and gives it an energy to continue on its own and fire the cartridge. The second safety is the firing pin blocking plunger safety, is in the newer model of gun. And the third safety, of course, is the manual safety right here. I have the gun upside down, but nonetheless you can see it, and that's must be cocked. That's on. Red dot says it's dangerous, ready to fire. Now here's how it works. The safety has a bump on it. It's right there. And the sear has a tail on it. And when you put it on safe, that bump goes underneath the sear tail, and it can't move down. You can see it move just a teeny bit, but it can't move enough to release the hammer. But when you take the safety off, this hump on the safety moves in front of that little tail on the sear, and now the sear can move further, and the hammer will fall. And yet, when the safety's on, it doesn't move that far. When the safety's on, it gets in the way, and it can't. Now you see, this one has a little play in it. This gun will never be fired, of course, but this gun has a little play in it. So if that were my gun, or a gun I was working on, like doing a trigger job on, I would tighten that up by either bumping the metal on the sear tail to make it extend down farther, or tigging a piece on it. But if you tig it, don't screw up the heat treat. Just add a piece of stainless or whatever is compatible real quick and get out of there and draw it back. That sear's probably half engages while it's on safe. I wouldn't like that in a real shooting gun. Now see, let's say we did a trigger job on this gun with the safety the way it is, and we bob the sear. That would probably be enough movement to get the sear, basically the true sear surface, the flat square true sear surface, out of the full cock notch. It would be setting on the inclined plane of the hammer, the full cock notch of the hammer. When I take it off safe, it would fire because it just slipped right off that inclined plane. So always, whenever you do a trigger job, you best check this relationship and see to it that the sear and safety have a pretty good fit with each other. And that's too loose for a real shooting gun. Now just for comparison, we have the Tanfoglio. Now, put it on safe, and the whole housing moves, but the sear doesn't disengage at all, does it? It's a good fit. So probably when they made the cutaway on this, they just got a little sloppy and cut off the metal where it didn't matter. This is a shooting gun, and its safety is certainly adequate. Interesting though, the sear housing on this gun, the factory cutaway, is a tighter fit than the Tanfoglio, although not very much. And I have mine apart, and it takes a little while to put back together, so I won't try it, but we might try that when I put this gun back together. Let's just take a look at the extractor for a minute. Kind of clever on this gun. Something that I advocate, although they've gone a little more extreme than I normally do, but I like what they did. The extractor is designed in such a way, if you can look at it, the hook isn't parallel with the slide face. It angles up this way slightly. Most extractor hooks are pretty much parallel with the face. In this case, they made the extractor hook angled this way a little bit, and for a good reason. I like to do that, although they've gone more extreme than I normally do, because then the sharp top edge of the extractor's hook digs into the case slightly, and it doesn't want to so easily slide down and off. Because if it slides off the extractor, it'll fail to eject. So I like that, only they've gone more extreme than me. Another advantage to what they've done is that when the ejector hits it, the case can angle up. I got it in the wrong spot, but we'll get it right in a minute. The case can angle up in that void of the extractor, and when we get a more up, didn't do that right. See, the case is angled up because the extractor hook didn't keep it from doing that. The extractor hook is like this. When the case is hit by the ejector, the case followed to that point and then starts its right angle or right exit out of the right side of the slide. So it gives you a more up and right ejection mode, and I like that. You don't have to have such a low ejection port, and they have lowered the ejection port pretty low there, isn't it? Not too far above the rail. In fact, it's not too far above the slide. I mean the frame. You see about 100 thousandths. That's pretty low. So it gives you lots of room to get the case out. And this angle on the extractor's hook also helps to get the case going up as well as right, and gets it out of that slot a little bit easier. Just another little design thing that's kind of clever. So subtle, but every little bit counts in a reliable firearm. Well, I think that I will put the cutaway together, and I'll put my gun back together, and then we'll show you how to take the whole thing apart. It's scary, but it's not that bad. Talk to you in a minute. Well, let's take this thing apart. First thing you do is drop the magazine. We're going to assume the gun isn't loaded. Push the slide back until the dots or lines, in this case lines, line up, and push on the slide stop. Some are very stiff. You might have to tap them with a plastic handle or something. Pull out the slide stop, bring the slide to rest like this, pull the trigger. Now remember, make sure it's unloaded. So the hammer's dropped, and just simply pull off the slide. Now take the slide the rest of the way apart, retract the recoil spring guide and recoil spring, let it come out backwards out of the slide, lift up the barrel and pull it out backwards. That leaves two pieces in this one, and there'd be three pieces in the newer ones with a firing pin blocking safety. So you push in the firing pin blocking safety or plunger, push the firing pin in and then down, and that'll carry the firing pin stop with it. In this case, we don't have the safety, so we don't have to push it in. We simply put the firing pin in, past the stop, and push down like that. The stop, you see, has come part way out. You slide it all the way out. Don't forget to stop the firing pin from flying out. That takes out the firing pin and return spring, and all we have left is the extractor. On the other gun, we would then dump out the firing pin blocking plunger and spring. Pull out the firing pin, or the extractor pin, extractor spring, and other than the sights, the slide is now stripped. While we're here, we might as well take the magazine apart since it's out. Now, the new style magazines will come apart similar but slightly different because they're not supposed to be able to be altered easily. Simply pull the latch down, push the bottom plate off, and take the goodies out. Just for the heck of it, I think we will take a new style magazine apart just to show you. Now see, this gun is bumped so the follower won't go down any lower, and this magazine is bumped so the follower won't go down any lower. If you try to put something in there and push this back out, this has been cut. The magazine box will pop in half, so they've done a pretty good job of deactivating it. You're tight. There we go. So it's pretty similar, but these knobs here prevent the shells from going any lower, and if you try to pound them out, you'll pop the box in half. Rather clever way of doing it, actually, but they're not the only ones that have done something like this. That was easy, wasn't it? All right, now we go to the bottom. That was duck soup. This gets a little more articulate. Now we look at something here that is unusual. What is this piece of sheet metal doing there? And it's pinned in place here. It fits down in here. This is just to show you how clever this gun is and how well thought out it is. When they made the gun, they cut all this stuff out because it's easier to mill all of this out in one whack than to make it hollow. Then they simply put this piece of sheet metal here. It prevents the magazine from catching anything when you insert it. That's what it's for. Oop. Wrong box, I'm sorry. Without this, the magazine could tip and catch in here. With the piece of metal in here, it can't do that. It can't snag on anything, so it goes in and out easier. That's all it's for. But many people wouldn't even bother with that. You'd have to fight the magazine in once in a while. Who cares? Well, anyway, they did. They took care of it. I think it's a nice touch. Now, to take the mainspring assembly out, we need to punch out the pin that holds this piece in place. This is now free, sort of. We push out the pin that holds the mainspring seat in place. We don't push it all the way out. I didn't push it quite far enough, though. See, what they've done is there's a hole in the mainspring seat, and this fits in it, and the pin goes through it to captivate the rear end, and the top end's held in by that pin. When it takes the mainspring housing the rest of the way out, we simply push it in hard with our finger to take the tension off the pin, pull the pin out. Now, sometimes you might have to drive it the rest of the way out, but this gun's loose enough that you can just take it out. Now, that's all easy. Now, the secret here is to take the safety out first, and the safety is retained by this little spring and a notch right there. We take a pocket knife or some other sharp instrument, lift this up and push it over here. Or if you have a longer one, just lift it up and hold it and you push the safety out. Now you can see where I've put it, right there. Just resting on that little spot. Now I'm going to push the safety out, but in the safety is a little spring and detent. So when you push it out, be careful that you don't lose it. There you have it. The spring goes in the hole in the safety. It's right there. And the detent goes like that. And we'll see more of it when we put it back together because it ain't easy. That's the hardest part of the whole gun. Well, probably the second hardest part of the whole gun. Now once the safety's out, we can simply lift out the sear and housing assembly. Then we take a punch and we push this pin up. That allows us to push the hammer pin out. Take out the hammer. And here is the strut that acts as your double action. So the drawbar catches here and pushes the hammer back into cock mode, then releases, and the whole thing slides forward and fires. Drawbar comes forward, picks it up right here, pushes it back, loses its grip, comes forward again. Now to get the trigger out, relatively simple. We simply drive out its pin. The spring will fly out, or try to. When the pin is out and the spring is out, the trigger is now free to come out. There's an assembly. Trigger, drawbar, complicated little dude. And you see right here is where the hammer strut catches. Right there. When you pull the trigger, this is pushed back and it cocks the hammer, loses its grip, and falls forward. Now I really don't see the sense in taking these out. It's pretty straightforward. You push out the pin and it takes it out. We'll leave that as an assembly. We'll leave the drawbar and trigger as an assembly. One pin, they come apart. There's no springs or anything else in them, just like on the hammer. But this dude will take apart in a minute or two. Well, we'll talk about that later. Now the gun is pretty well gutted except for the spring that pushes the drawbar up, the spring that activates the magazine catch, and the magazine catch. And they come out really easy. If you look down on the frame, you will see a screw with two slots on it, 90 degrees apart. Just unscrew it. Screws out. Here's the drawbar spring. Now the spring for the magazine catch is a little harder to get out. I have a hooked screwdriver here. Pull it up, pull it out. The magazine catch will simply fall out after that. So now the frame is completely gutted. All the parts are out. Now this dude is interesting. We're going to push out this pin. The sear will come out, but just barely. I push out that pin, and that pin holds the sear in place and the sear spring. And when I pull out the punch, the spring's going to fly, so I'm going to put it this way. There's the spring. All right. The gun is now, for all practical purposes, completely apart. Now, the next thing we do is going to clean and oil it. Well, now we're going to show you how to clean a gun with very expensive high-tech equipment. I have the gun completely apart, and it's in a tray, a cookie tray actually. I have two cleaners that I use. I'm simply going to use soap and water. I have a little container of warm water. I have Simple Green, and I have Oil Eater. I like them both about the same. I like the smell of the Simple Green. My wife does not. My wife prefers the smell of the oil eater, and I don't mind it either. So when I clean a gun in the house, I use the oil eater. When I'm going to clean a gun outdoors, and I have facilities to clean a gun outdoors, I use the simple green. I prefer the smell of the simple green. Right now, we're kind of enclosed, and I'm going to use the oil eater. I'm just going to spray everything down. Get everything hosed down with it. Stir it up. Let it set for a short while, and I would simply take a toothbrush and scrub the parts a little bit if they need it. Now this stuff removes oil and grease really fast, so it doesn't take much. The magazine was kind of dirty. In the water it goes. The slide had some crud up here in the barrel channel. The rails. That's really about all that was dirty on it. The frame was pretty good except right where the grips go. Now if you got really old, dried, oxidized oil, then you might want to let it soak a little longer, or maybe even wet it down, scrub it, wet it down again. Now this gun had dried oxidized oil since 1978 sitting here. It's off, it's gone. Well, there's a little teeny piece right there. Gone now. Clean. At least that area is. The rails are now. In the water it goes. I'll continue to do this, put everything in the water, rinse it off, dry it off. The next time you see it, it'll be back in this tray ready for a shot of oil. Talk to you in a minute. Well, the gun is clean, and all of its little parts are dry now, and drying is important. You got a couple of ways to dry them, and what I do is I wash it and I kind of dry it off with a paper towel. Then you can blow it off with air, or do what I do, put it in an oven at about 225 degrees for 15-20 minutes and let it warm up, and then that dries off all the remaining moisture. Then you put it in a tray like this and you squirt it down with oil, and I like break-free. It's a really good lubricant, it's a good rust preventative, and it's a cleaner in that any dirt that's in the pores and the soap that we use will get most of it out, but if any's in there, it'll lift it, and you wipe it off next time you wipe down the gun. Anyway, I'm going to hose this down, get the oil everywhere, then I'm going to wipe off the excess, and the next time you see it after I spray this, it'll be out of the tray and here ready to assemble. We just hose everything down. I like the break-free because it doesn't have much of a reaction with me. A lot of petroleum distillates and I don't get along anymore, which makes life a little harder when you're working with it all the time. All right, now I'm just going to wipe off the excess now, and when I do that, I also get it on everything, so that if I miss a spot when I spray, when I wipe it off, I'm going to get it on it. So the next time you see it then, it'll be sitting here minus the tray, all wiped down, ready to assemble. Well, it's cleaned, it's oiled, it's wiped down and ready to reassemble. We'll start with the magazine. When you put the follower in, make sure you put it the front end in toward the front end of the magazine box. Magazine's assembled. Let's start now with the slide. The slide has the firing pin and the extractor in it. We'll put the extractor in first. Start with the extractor spring and the extractor. And the extractor has a hook on it, a lip. You have to kind of put it in forward and get it into place. You can't just shove it in. You've got to come in this way. not all the way back with this for some reason. There we go. Perfect. Lined up like it was made for it. Now you'll notice that I kind of laid this out. You notice when I start on something, I grab the extractor and the extractor spring, and I had taken the wrong pin and put beside it. I put the trigger pin instead of the extractor spring by it. But normally when I lay it down, if I recognize the parts, I put them kind of close together. See, like here's the sear system, here's the magazine catch system, here's the safety system, here's the firing pin, there's the firing pin stop, there's the hammer pin which should have gone there, and there's the mainspring and cap or seat for the hammer. I just kind of do it to just save me a bit of time, and I'm not sure it saves me any time, but I do it. I feel comfortable when I do it, I guess. Anyway, it's the way I do it. Now the firing pin stop, you can tell usually by which way it goes down or toward the firing pin or the front of the gun. You can tell something's been hitting it here, but not all the way around, and here you've got a worn spot all the way around. That's where the shoulder of the pin comes back and stops every time you fire the gun. So we know then that it goes this way. Now another way is that we have a cutout here and we have a cutout in the slide, so you can match those up too. But most guns will have those telltale marks so you can tell which way is right, which way is wrong to put it back together if it's been used. New guns are a different story. Barrel, recoil spring assembly, that's recoil spring and guide. The slide is now assembled. Now we'll put in the magazine catch. It goes in really easy, just kind of drops in. But now it gets a little bit harder because the spring fits in there. That's what spring loads it. So we put the magazine catch in, then we have to compress the spring and slide it into place. If you'll notice when you took it out, you'll see how it goes, so it won't be so bad putting it back in. It's not hard to put in, it's just different. I take a pair of, I guess they call them spoonbill or duckbill pliers. You can see I get the spring started in a slot in the frame. And then I just put my finger here and push it down. I'm just looking down to line up the end of the pin, the spring, with that slot and the slide stop, and it'll go when it gets there. It just went in. I just kind of wiggled and jiggled when it was lined up and it went in. So now it's spring loaded. Now we put in the drawbar or trigger bar spring. I think you can see it down there. Just one spring on top of the other all the way back. I'll put the screw in. Now you don't want this to come loose, so when you're assembling it for real, I would recommend that you put in a drop of Loctite, of blue Loctite, something that's not permanent, but something that will retard the screws unscrewing. That's in. Now the next thing we put in is the trigger. And I didn't take this apart when we cleaned it, but I'll show you how easy it comes apart. I just punch out, it's apart. Start this pin just to the edge of the inside slot of the trigger. Put the trigger bow in place and push the pin through with my finger. That's it. Now to assemble the trigger we need to have a slave pin. Most of you know what a slave pin is. It's a pin that holds an assembly together while you put it into a main assembly. In this case, the trigger slave pin is 83 to 84 thousandths in diameter and 320 thousandths long. It's that little guy right there. And it holds this spring in place. You shove the short leg down inside the trigger. Then I'm going to take a punch and put through it to hold the spring in place while I put in my slave pin. The long leg sticks out the front and the shorter leg goes down inside the trigger. I'll take the trigger bow out so you can, no I can't, yeah I can. I'll take the trigger bow out so you can see it. You see the spring? And that's the right way for it to go. Now we'll put it in the gun. If you take this apart, when you put the drawbar back together on the trigger, make sure that the notches are on the top, the part that grabs the double action sear, the cam that cams it off so that the hammer will fall on double action. Those go up. Don't put it in that way. It won't work. And slip it in the frame, and you see to it that this part goes above the lower shelf and on underneath the little ridges on the side of the frame. Push the trigger down into place. And now, when you push the trigger down, you're going to compress that spring. I have to get the spring, the trigger spring, on top of the frame. I'll show you the notch. You can probably see it now. See the slot? The spring has to go in that. So you push the trigger forward as you push it down. Now I got the pin started, and the slave pin is on one side of the hole, and the real pin is on the other side. Slave pin is now out, and I'll seat the real pin. That seems to work. Now I forgot to take something out of the frame when I showed you. I took it out later. What it is, it's this little pin in this spring. That's a detent for the slide stop. This is the detent spring, and it goes in the frame like that. And you can see the slot that goes in right there. Now I line up this low spot with the hole, kind of put it in place. I take a thin screwdriver, I got this split one, I'll push it in. Now you look through the hole, you see the spring sticking up in the way. I take the pin that holds it, and I don't think you can see it here, but see how a little groove in it? Well, that little detent spring will snap up in that groove when I get it in place. What I do is I put it in the hole, I push on it with my finger, then I take my thin piece, and I push the spring in hard. And then when I get it on the spring, simply take something and push it the rest of the way in. And then push it to the detent. There it is. That's in. That's the detent for the slide stop. It's a very good detent. Okay. The next thing we're going to put in is the hammer. And it simply drops in, and its pin goes through. my little sear in the way there. And put the pin through. Now, remember, it has a head, but it can come out easily. So what we do, remember we had a pin. We left it in the frame. It goes right there. You probably can see it just barely. I'm going to drive that in. Now you can see it, probably as I drive it, it's going to come down through this space there as I drive it in. Pin came out. That's not a good sign. There it is. You can see it crossing the hole so that the pin can't back out. Now we're going to assemble the sear in the sear housing. Ooh. Okay, to do this now we're going to need a slave pin. The slave pin that we need is 116 to 117 thousandths in diameter and approximately 490 thousandths long. It can be a bit shorter, just like the other one could be a little bit shorter than 320 thousandths, but not appreciably shorter, and certainly not much longer, maybe 5 or 10 thousandths longer. But the dimensions are pretty close to what you want for best results. The spring has a long leg and a short leg. This has a short leg and an even shorter leg. And it goes in the sear with the short leg up. Now remember that this is the part right here that the safety bears against, and this is the actual sear surface right here that the hammer gets caught on. So it goes in the housing that way, and the spring wants to push it this way into the hammer. So you put the spring in like that and put the pin through. Now we have an assembled spring on the sear. Now this is the tricky part. The sear assembly goes in the housing up from the bottom. But this spring has to be compressed because it lays on the top of the housing right here. Remember, that's the thing we lifted up so we could take out the cross pin on the safety to get it out. Now what I'm trying to do is push it up into place with the spring being compressed, and it'll go, but it's a tight fit, folks. There it is. I got it in. The pin almost lines up. Now it's a little cocked, so I'm going to straighten it out, I hope. Hasn't straightened yet. Good. Now we've got it just about lined up on both sides. I'll push the real pin through. It's as wide as the housing. The other one's longer. We don't want that one. I'm pushing on the pin and trying to push this end into place at the same time. Slave pin is out and the sear's in and it's free to move. Now this is ready to assemble in the gun. And there it is in place. It'll kind of stay there while we assemble the safety. This is probably the hardest part of assembling the whole gun, is putting the safety back in place. Oops, that just came out. There we go. Remember the little spring and detent that was in the safety? We took it out, they came out. Well, now they have to go back in. And they don't want to go back in, folks. They're a tough one. I put the spring in the hole in the safety. Then I put the detent in place. I take my split screwdriver and I hold this down and I push the piece in toward the spring. Didn't want to go. There's a little lip in there and it has to go underneath that little lip. But you can probably see what I'm up to here. I'm going to push this, compressing the spring, and into that little lip that's right there. I've got it wedged in basically dead center. I've got it locked on top dead center, so I think I'm just going to put it in that way. Okay, I've pushed the sear housing assembly down and back. Oh, first I've got to make sure that the sear spring is in place. It's not, it's in the way. I've got to lift it up. That's just exactly how it was when I took it out. I'm going to do the same thing so I can put the thing back in. Now if you have one of the longer tail, this is easier to do. You can see it now on top of there. I think you can see it. So now the sear system is down and back, and I can take the safety and slip in place. I cock the hammer. Safety's now in and detents. Now we assemble the hammer, or I should say the mainspring assembly. Put the mainspring on the hammer strut, or mainspring guide, whichever you want to call it. It's supposed to be through the hole. Then we put the seat in place. And here's the tricky part. We now put the pin through the hole in the frame and one side of the hole in the seat, but not through the other side, not even into the middle. The smaller punch went in and held it. Now I can control it. I put the pin through. I was holding the seat in place, but it's not blocking the place for the little filler to go. We put it in and put it down the hole. Then we push the pin through, and that'll hold the rear end of that little plate in place. Now the front end, or the top end, has its own little pin. I think this is the way it goes. Wants to go anyway. Now remember the sizes of the two slave pins? The trigger is 83 to 84 thousandths in diameter and approximately 320 thousandths long. And the sear pin is 116 to 117 thousandths in diameter and approximately 490 thousandths long. The length is not critical. It can be shorter by several thousandths and not much longer, more than maybe 5 or 10. I think it depends somewhat on the gun. Put the grips on. Hey, grips. Let's see if we have an action here. Oh, we do, don't we? Does the safety work? Yes, it does. Does it detent? Yes, it does. Drop the hammer, slide the slide on. Push it back until the lines line up. Put the slide stop through. Was a dummy. That's it. Well, that wasn't so bad. Reassembly isn't so bad, is it? You're going to need those slave pins, though, so remember the dimensions, because you're going to have them to get it back together. Now, I'm not going to say you can't. It's just going to take you a whole lot longer without them. Let's spend a minute or so and talk about a few accessories that are available for this gun. And I'm not a real fan on accessories for most guns, and this gun's pretty good the way it comes. But there's a few things you can get. Of course, you can get a scope mount. Well, okay. You can get different grips, and I do like checkered wooden grips, but there's nice soft gushy rubbers and rubber grips and all kinds of things you can get. There's also an ambi safety. But I'm not left-handed, so I see no need for those. But if you're a lefty, you might like this. And by the way, some of the versions of the gun also come with an ambi safety. And then here's an accessory that everybody should have. It's the new trigger. And the nice thing about it is it has a screw to adjust the over travel of the trigger. There's different sights that you can get for them, all kinds of different sights actually. If you're doing serious target work, you're probably going to want an adjustable sight. You probably want a little better target type sight. And for night shooting, if you happen to be doing a lot of deer hunting at night or something like in Europe, why you might want glow-in-the-dark sights or something like that. And they're available, of course. So you got accessories or optional sights, optional grips, optional trigger. If you're lefty, optional ambi safety on some guns that don't have it. As far as accessories goes, that's about all available at this time. And I'm not sure a lot of them need to be purchased anyway. I've enjoyed making the tape. I really do like this gun. It's neat, it's well designed, it's well made, and it works really well. I hope you enjoy the tape. I hope you enjoy working on your gun, and I'll see you next time.
Attention, gun owners, collectors, hobby gunsmiths, FFL dealers, and professional gunsmiths. The American Gunsmithing Institute offers you comprehensive training and information through our exclusive instructional videos. AGI's complete line of how-to gunsmithing kits will give you the results you're looking for, whether you're refinishing a stock or glass bedding a rifle. Each kit comes complete with AGI-approved products and a video instruction manual featuring a master gunsmith. Whether the process is as simple as tactical spray coating or as involved as parkerizing, we guide you step by step as only AGI can, giving you the tips and techniques you need to avoid mistakes and get professional results. In the AGI Armorers series, each course covers a specific firearm. We give a brief overview of the history, demonstrate the design and function using cutaways, and guide you step by step through complete disassembly and reassembly down to the last part. We also show proper cleaning and lubrication methods, troubleshooting tips, repair techniques, and review available accessories. No other video will give you this level of instruction on one specific firearm. We offer courses on all the popular makes and models. Want to learn more about general gunsmithing techniques? In AGI's complete practical gunsmithing course, we show you how to set up your shop, and then we cover step by step the most common gunsmithing projects. In over 4 hours of exclusive video, a master gunsmith will teach you precision scope mounting, sight installation, stock repair, cold bluing, glass bedding, recoil pad installation, how to remove a dent from a shotgun barrel, and many other tricks of the trade. If you're interested in becoming a gunsmith, the American Gunsmithing Institute is internationally recognized for our professional gunsmithing course. It contains over 100 hours of detailed instruction on 56 videotapes. Instructor Robert H. Dunlap has over 30 years of professional gunsmithing experience and has taught professionally for 20 years at one of the nation's top gunsmithing schools. He will guide you step by step through the design, troubleshooting, and repair of all types of pistols, revolvers, shotguns, rifles, and .22s. Our close-up video techniques, combined with Mr. Dunlap's exclusive knowledge and unique